decided a few months ago it would be good for us to just talk about something which touches us all, something that is relevant to us all, and it is our money and our wealth. And we called it Money Matters because it's matters to do with money, but also because money does matter. It matters to us, it matters to God, and it is an integral part of our faith. It's an integral part of our discipleship. It's an integral part of our walk with Jesus. And Andy kicked off last week and just spoke about what our attitude to wealth. He spoke about the parable of the man with the barns who was just investing and investing and investing in things that were ultimately not going to be eternal. Those things were going to ultimately run out. And so, he said that Jesus calls him a fool. Now, he doesn't call him a fool so that he can make him look stupid and belittle him. He calls him a fool because that's what he was. Not because of what he had chosen to do, but the fact that he had missed out on investing on something that was far more important. So he talked a little bit about that last week. And so I want to go off the back of that really today, but I am going to talk a little bit about giving, and I'm going to challenge you this morning. And hey, listen, here's the deal. You can walk out of here and you can say, you know what, don't really hold to all of that, don't really believe in all of that, and that's your prerogative. No one's going to put any pressure on you whatsoever. And I back up what Andy said last week. We're not doing this in order to try and get the offerings up. We're not doing it to keep the lights on or to keep the heating on at the bridge. And we're doing it because it is part of our covenant walk with Jesus. And when we understand the power of the financial seed that God has put into our lives, whether you consider yourself wealthy or whether you don't consider yourself wealthy, the reality is that we here in this country, probably 99% of people in this room are in the top 3 to 4% in terms of wealth and income. So whether you regard yourself as wealth, comparing yourself to somebody else, or whether you don't, is kind of irrelevant. This is not about how much you have and how much you don't have. This is something to do with our heart. It's something to do with our relationship with God. So we will be talking a little bit about that. I thought we'd kick off with a few interesting quotes. Thanks, Ed. Here's some quotes, and see if you can guess who they are. The first one you may, if you're a reader, then you'll probably get the first one. Annual income £20, annual expenditure 19 and 6, result happiness. Annual income £20, annual expenditure £20 and 6, result misery. Anyone know who said that? I'll say it, Dickens, and what's the name of it was David Copperfield. Okay, what about the next one? Money and success don't change people. They merely amplify what's already there. You won't get this one. Famous celeb. You can go to the next one, actually, because it will just have the things there. Will Smith. Will Smith said that. Next one, thanks, Ed. Always borrow from a pessimist. He won't expect it back. Some of you are going, that's really good advice. I'm going to put that down in my book. When a man becomes rich, either God gains a partner or man loses a soul. That's deep, isn't it? Say to the person next to you, that is really deep. That's profound. You'll find out who that was in a minute. I'd like to live as a poor man, but with lots of money. Right then, go next one for me, Ed. So Oscar Wilde said the first thing. Tony Campolo said this. That's a really good quote. When a man becomes rich, either God gains a partner or the man loses a soul. And then I would like to live as a poor man with lots of money. That was Pablo Picasso. Put the next one on for me, please, Ed. That's great. Here's the question that I want to start off with this morning. Okay? And this is a fascinating question. How much of what is yours is yours? How much of what is yours is actually yours? That is a really interesting question, right? And we could have all kinds of different answers to that. But just think about it. Let it just soak in just for a couple of seconds. How much of what is yours is yours? What do you think of? What comes to your mind when we ask that question? What percentage would you say is yours? Now, there are some in the room who would say, well, it's all mine. I mean, I worked for it. I worked hard for my money. I earned my money. It is all mine. And it's my choice as to what I would give. Probably that's the most instinctive human response to that question. And to be honest, probably at least it's an honest response to it, right? Fair enough. I've earned what I've got. I've paid tax on it. But let me ask you, where did the ability to earn that money come from? Where did your health come from that enabled you to do it? Where did the opportunity come from? The favor, the breath in your lungs to do it. Is it really all down to you? Somebody else may say, none of it. It's all God's. That's the super spirituals in the room. Right? Now, we know that the Bible actually does say that actually everything belongs to God. We affirm the theology, but today I want to challenge the reality. It's the right answer, but does our lifestyle really reflect that? It's amazing how quickly the idea of nothing belongs to me changes rapidly when somebody scratches your brand new car on the first day that you've got it. Then all of a sudden we realize, no, actually, I really have a connection with that, and that can be painful. Maybe you're in the room and you're going, well, 10% of it belongs to God. This will come from those who have probably been shaped in church and in tithing teaching in the past. Many Christians would instinctively divide everything they have into, well, 10% of that is God's and 90% of it is mine. Others will say, well, it depends on what you mean. This is a more thoughtful response. Someone who is financially astute may ask that. People may start distinguishing between, well, what do you mean? Earned income? Are we including inheritance? Are we including possessions? What are we including in that? What are we excluding in that? And we start to categorize God as or those finances as God deductible. And what isn't God's and what is, it gets very, very complicated. Others, you may be sitting there in silence. It may be a bit of an awkward question. It may be a bit uncomfortable for you. Please don't let it be that, because we're not going to come around checking on you. We're just challenging you to think about, how do we see what we have? Some of you may even be, nervous laughter, a little bit of discomfort in what we're saying. There's a report out a few years ago that said in the Church of England, only 3 out of 1,000 sermons are to do with possessions and to do with wealth, which is interesting because Jesus spoke about it probably more than anything else in the New Testament. There are over 2,000 verses that have to do with possessions and have to do with wealth, but there's around 500 verses that Jesus talks about prayer. So we can't ignore that. I'm not saying giving's more important than prayer, but we can't ignore that. And so, for us to get awkward when we start to talk about finances and wealth and giving and generosity, that really shows something that's going on the inside of us. Jesus knew the powerful magnetism of wealth, that it can become a major rival to our relationship with God. Jesus didn't say you cannot serve God and Satan. He said you cannot serve God and mammon, which is wealth and possessions. That's very interesting. Why did God not say you can't serve God and Satan? He said, no, you can't serve God and all of the worldly possessions that you pursue in life, because he's made a strong connection between the two. So we want to look a little bit at that today. But here's the deal. Whatever your position is on this, every response to that question in this room reveals a theology that you have. It reveals a belief system that you have about the things that are in your possession and who they belong to. And it's not just a theology of money, it's actually a theology of lordship. Who is really Lord of everything in my life? So I want to talk for a few moments about the difference between ownership and stewardship. And then I want to share a couple of things and maybe reframe that question that we just looked at a moment ago. And then I'm going to ask Usha to come and share a little bit about our personal experience, about how we've seen that. And then we want to wrap up with a few things after that. So let's talk a little bit about ownership versus stewardship. And here's where the rubber hits the road. In our modern Western society, we are obsessed with ownership. An Englishman's home is his. Possession is 9/10 of the law. We've heard some of these quotes. He who dies with the most toys wins. We've heard this quote, haven't we? Get rich or die trying. You see, we are obsessed in our Western world particularly with this idea. We are compelled to be owners because ownership brings power, ownership brings control, ownership brings freedom, or at least that's what we think. But here's the deal. When you read through Scripture, and you read particularly through the New Testament, we find that the kingdom teaches us rather than to be owners, but to be stewards, to be custodians. That everything we have been entrusted with by God. It carries a trust. We are trustees, if you want to put it that way, of all that we have in our lives. So yes, we can make decisions about it, of course. We can choose to invest. We can choose to buy things. We can choose to give some of it away. But it ultimately is not ours. We are custodians of what God has given us. And when you read through the parables that Jesus taught in the New Testament, you'll find that many of them, particularly those to do with money, are actually all to do with people who have been entrusted with something. The master or the lord of the house or the father gives something, entrusts an inheritance or entrusts his estate to somebody. And then he goes on to tell the story of what happened about that. We have the talents. We have the 20 minas. We have the wicked tenants. We have the shrewd manager. We have the rich fool that we talked about last week. And it's interesting that in all of those situations, Jesus talks about people who have been entrusted with something from the master, and the examination on their life has been, what have you done with what you have been entrusted with? So we do have a degree of autonomy over what God has given us. But it all comes down to heart. It all comes down to what is the purpose of everything that is in my life. Every resource, every wealth, every relationship, every talent, every qualification, every gift that I have, what is the primary purpose for that? And I want to say from the off, and don't mishear me here, okay? The Bible is not anti-wealth. I think sometimes people think that poverty, there's virtue in poverty. There's no virtue in poverty whatsoever. Okay, so we're not talking about, the Bible's anti-wealth and you've got to live, in rags and ruin, in order to be holy. Absolutely not. And we can go through the Bible and we can find so many people in the Bible who were extremely rich. I did a little bit of research on that just this week. And if you put it into modern terms, how rich do you think Solomon was? It was an accountant or somebody in the financial business. They examined everything that Solomon had. What do you think his personal wealth would have been in today's terms? 2 trillion pounds. 2 trillion pounds. Okay? That's just half of what we've got. 2 trillion pounds. David, it's estimated David had 300 billion pounds in current value and worth. Abraham was worth David was 300. Joseph, 200 billion. Abraham, 15 billion. Isaac, 10 billion. And these are all the good guys. Do you know who the richest man in history is? The richest man in history was Nebuchadnezzar. And his estimated wealth was 3 billion pounds in today's money. What did I say? Sorry, trillion. 3 trillion pounds. Good, you're listening. Excellent. Fantastic. So owning stuff's not bad. We're not saying owning stuff is bad. These things keep falling off me. I was trying to wear them this morning. And ownership's not bad. I'm not saying to you today, right, as soon as you get home, put everything you've got on eBay, okay, and sell it all off and come and give it to the church. If you want to do that, I'm happy for you to do that. But we are not saying that. We're not saying that legal ownership or human ownership is wrong. It's not about that. It's about where is it directed to and where is our motive in all of this. Because stewardship is about how we attach ourselves to what is in our possession. Can I say that again? Good stewardship is about evaluating how we are attached, whether we have an unhealthy attachment to the things that are in our possession. It's not about the things that are in our possession. So you could have £1 million and you could have a good attitude towards that. You could have a tenner in your pocket and you could have a bad attitude towards that. It's about how am I attached to the things that are in my life. Stewardship is about how we use what is in our hands. The steward knows that he has control over what is in his possession, but it is for the purpose of the master. That's what really counts. Ownership is delegated. We have delegated ownership of everything I own, everything I have, my house, my car, my incredibly, fashionable clothes, whatever it may be, all of those things I have delegated ownership over. Ultimately, they're not mine. We may hold things in our hands, but let me ask you, whose name is really on it? You may hold something in your hand and say, this is mine. Let me ask you, whose name is on it? Is it your name or is it God's name? And if we can wrestle with this and if we can grapple with this at a mindset level, it will liberate us and free us up to see what is in our lives so differently so that we will be able to use it in a really powerful way. Stewardship recognizes that ultimate ownership is about authorship and creatorship. I wasn't even sure that was a word, but I put it into my thesaurus and it is a word, creatorship. Okay, so stewardship recognizes that ultimate ownership is about authorship and about creatorship. God's ownership is not just factual, it is ontological. Now that's a word that basically means everything exists because he willed it into being. So God owns everything that he created and everything that he authored. And God authored and created everything. So God is the owner of everything. I came up with a new term this week. I'm thinking of writing a theological book. I've come up with a new term. Okay, so we know that God is what? He is omnipotent and he is omniscient. Okay, if you don't know what those terms are, then go and have a chat with Ed. Ed will explain what they all are. Basically, it means God is all-powerful, God is all-knowing, and God is everywhere at all times. That word omni means all, okay? So we refer to God. It's a theological term. Well, I've created another one, omni-owner. God is the omni-owner of all things. Do you like that? You're not really sure. What's he doing making up theological terms? He is the omni-owner of all things. Don't believe me? Let's read a few scriptures together. We had them at the beginning. I think they'll come up. Psalm 24, 1-2 says this. What? The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. The world and all who live in it. 1 Chronicles 29, 11, 14. Everything comes from you. This is King David, right? One of those that was on the list that I mentioned earlier. One of the richest men in history. And we have only given you what's come from your own hand. We're only giving you back what is yours. Haggai 2, verse 8. The silver is mine and the gold is mine, declares the Lord. And I love this one, Psalm 50, verse 9, where the psalmist says, where God says, I have no need of a bull from your stall or a goat from your pen, because every animal is mine. And we know the last bit of this, don't we? And I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. He's saying, look, don't just bring me what you've got and think that that's good enough. I'm looking for heart, because I own all of that stuff anyway. I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. So stewardship, this is an important point. I want you to grab this as we go a little bit further on. This is the defining thing. Stewardship is not the rejection of human ownership. It is the recognition of divine accountability. Can I say, have I got that up there? Yeah, can I say that again? Stewardship is not the rejection of human ownership. We're not saying, oh, you don't own anything and don't take care of what you got because it ain't yours anyway. We're not saying that. It is the recognition of divine accountability. That what is in my hand, what is in my home, what is in my bank account, what is in my wallet right now, I am accountable to God because ultimately He is the one who created, authored, and owns everything. Are we grabbing where I'm going this morning? Because if we can get our mindset right, if we can transform our mind in this, then it will help us with some of the other things that we may talk about. Listen, even the wealth that we produce ourselves, because you may be sitting there going, yeah, but I built my business. You know, I've done this, I've done that. Even the wealth that we produce ourselves is enabled by God. And some of you will know Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse 18, where God says, it is God who has given you the power to create wealth. It's God that gives us the power to create wealth. So not only does He own it all, but anything that we create, He's saying, actually, I've given you the initiative, I've given you the enabling, I've given you the ability to create wealth. So everything belongs to God. So before we claim credit for our wealth and our achievement, ask the question, who gave me these skills? Who gave me these talents? Who gave me this intellect? Who gave me this qualification? Who gave me this opportunity? Who gave me this talent? You know, I always laugh, you know, when you watch the Oscars and you'll get people getting up and they'll get up and then they'll go on about everything and then they'll go, and I just want to thank God for this. Now, I don't know how genuine they are. Maybe sometimes they are genuine. I think sometimes they're not, because we can give thanks to God with our lips, but not actually give thanks to God with our lives. And it's one thing to get up and thank God with a word for the little statue that you've got, but what's going on in the other 999% of your life? Because we honor God not just with our words, but we honor God with our wealth. Don't believe me? Then we read Proverbs 3, verse 9 through to 10. Honor the Lord with your wealth. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything that you produce. That is a challenge to us today, isn't it? Do we honor God with our wealth? Usually we can come here, we can sing songs, we can honor God with our words. We can honor God in so many different ways, but the command here is honor God with your wealth. I want to also, I read this again this week, that particular passage. And you know where that is situated in the Bible, don't you? Proverbs chapter 3, right? Proverbs 3, chapter 5 and 6. Anyone know what Proverbs chapter 3, 5 and 6 is? Come on. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Lean not unto your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge Him, right? We all know that. It's said at every baptism. You don't find verse 9 or 10 read out at too many baptisms, do you? Oh, and by the way, honor God with your wealth. So honoring God is more than lip service. That is really challenging to us. It's challenging to me. Do I honor God with my wealth? Do I honor God with everything that God has placed in my hand and in my world? Because that's what He's looking for. And it's a heart thing. It's not an amount thing. It's not about getting past a certain milestone or a certain point. So here we are. Here's the better question, maybe. As we read the Bible and as we realize this, perhaps the better question is not how much of mine should I give to God, but how much of what is God's should I keep for myself? Now that really is a game changer, right? That flips everything round. That reverses the starting point from this is mine, how much do I give away? Well, you may be generous, you may not be generous. But it changes the paradigm completely of how we think to this is all God's. How much now has He entrusted me to manage, to employ, to invest, to enjoy in my life? Because that's the question. It reveals what we value most in life. That's the question that will break the tyranny of selfishness over our lives. Some of you may know a man called Rick Warren, or you may have heard of him. He's the pastor of a large church, or he's retired now. He was the pastor of a large church in California. And I've been over to the church, actually. We went on a church visit there many years ago. And he wrote the book, The Purpose-Driven Life, which some of you have probably read. And that book made a lot of money. He made a lot of money out of that book, 30, 40 million that he made out of that book. And he said when the money started to flow in, I've watched him on an interview, so when the money started to flow in, my wife and I, we began to get extremely uncomfortable about all of this wealth coming into our lives. We didn't want it to taint us. We didn't want it to pollute the way that we were ministering and change the paradigms within which we lived. He said, so we made a few decisions. He said, one thing that we decided to do is that we would pay back every single church that we had ever been employed by all of our lives. So they'd been employed by a number of different churches. He'd been in ministry for 25 years. And they went back and they paid back every single church that had ever given them any money. So we didn't want to be a burden to them. We wanted to pay them back for what they had invested in our lives. And then he said this. He said, then we decided we were going to reverse tithe. He said, so what we started to do is to give away 90 and just keep 10. Now, we can sit here and go, yeah, but you had millions. Listen, it's nothing to do with the amount. It's to do with the heart. He could have had those millions and decided not to do that, but there was something in his heart and his life that said, no, this is all God's. I'm going to keep enough for me, and I'm sure he has a good life, and there's nothing wrong with having a good life and having nice things and having a nice car and all of that, but it's what order that comes in our lives. So he said, first and foremost, I'm going to give all of this away to God, and then I'm going to keep back 10% for myself. And then he came up with this quote, and I think it's a brilliant quote. And he says this. He said, every time I give, it breaks the grip of materialism on my life. Every time I give, it makes me more like Jesus. Every time I give, my heart grows bigger, not smaller. It breaks the tyranny of self. When we hold what we have in our lives lightly and say, this is yours, God, it breaks the grip that it has. Oh, that's mine. I've got to do this. I've got to save this. I've got to store it up. I've got to store it up because I want to do this and I want to do that. So can you get where I'm at this morning? I'm not saying money's wrong, not saying be wealthy is wrong. In fact, I believe it's part of the blessing of God that God wants to bless us materially. It's all about heart. It's all about attitude. It realigns our dependency. It realigns our dependency on God. It cleans the lens so that we acknowledge that God is the source of everything that we have. 1 Corinthians 4:7, Paul says, what is it that you have that you did not receive? What have you got in your life that you didn't receive from God? Our dependency is 100% on him. And then fourthly, it produces open-handed living. Open-handed living. We can be generous. We can be open-handed with what is in our life. And I've said it here before. I've said it most places that I go. And here's the deal. If God can get it through you, he will get it to you. If God can get it through you, he will get it to you. If you will open yourself up and become a conduit of God's blessing to others, then God will keep pouring it in. If you want to lock up and shut up both ends of that conduit, then once you're full, you're full. And the blessing will stop flowing. You know the widow who had all of the vessels, and she went and collected all the pots and pans from everybody. And the prophet said to her, these things are going to get filled with oil. Let me tell you something. The oil only stopped when the containers ran out. God didn't stop blessing. The oil would have gone on forever if she had had enough availability in her life. So God is constantly pouring into our lives. So we want to move from dutiful giving to joyful giving. Because giving into the house of God blesses us. And you go, how can it bless me? It's money that's coming out. Giving to God is never a deduction. It is always an investment. Never see your giving to God or you're giving to a need or you're giving to somebody because you want to bless them. Never see that as a deduction. in your bank account. Never look down the negative and put it in red on your Excel worksheet, okay? Don't ever do that. It's an investment. Now, whether that investment comes back directly to you, whether it comes back at some point in the future, whether it comes back via blessing somebody else, we don't know. But every time we sow out, there is something that will grow from what we sow out. Let me encourage you with that. Never to see your giving into the house or giving into the kingdom as being a deduction, but it's an investment. I'm going to move through a couple of things. I want to get Usha up. Here's a myth I want to blow away, and I'm going to get Usha up in a few moments. And here's something that I've heard many, many times before, and if I'm honest, I've probably said it myself, okay? Okay, if I had more, I'd give more. I'm going to tell you something. That is a myth. That is a deceitful statement. If I had more, I would give more. If you can't give out of the tenner in your pocket, you're not going to give out of the million that you win on the pools. Sorry, old cultural reference, the lottery. Some of you remember the pools, don't you? Because giving and generosity is a spirit, okay? It's not a financial transaction. So we can give regardless. Some of the most generous people that I know are people that didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. Really have. We've traveled. We've traveled to different places, traveled to Africa, traveled to India. We traveled to a number of different places, and we've gone to places that, compared to us, are in relative poverty, but their generosity, they'll give whatever they've got. Went to Ethiopia, didn't we? They had absolutely nothing. They were in a shack in the middle of in a rubbish tip. You were there, John. You remember that? And I had absolutely nothing at all. And then they would bring out and give us the very best that they had. Some coffee beans, some popcorn. And they would put it on the table. And they would be so pleased that they could give that to us. And it probably cost them most of what they were going to have that day. See, generosity is not about how much you've got. It's not about your bank balance. It's about your heart balance. It's about your heart balance. Did you know that there is a First National Bank of Heaven? Let me read something to you. Philippians chapter 4, verse 14. This is Paul speaking about the Macedonian Christians and how they gave. And he says this. He says, moreover, as you Philippians know, in the early days of your acquaintance with the gospel, when I set out from Macedonia, not one church shared with me in the matter of giving and receiving, except you only. For even when I was in Thessalonica, you sent me aid again and again when I was in need. Now listen, verse 17 says this. Not that I am looking for a gift. What does he say next? But I am looking for what may be credited to your account. Wham! Bam! What a statement. Paul is saying, you gave to me, you gave to me, you gave to me, and I received it willingly and I received it joyfully. Not because I needed it, because I wanted you to invest something in the bank of heaven. Every time we give, every time we come open-handed with what is in our hands, it is an investment. And God will bring a return on that investment. Generosity provokes us to give in that way. I'm just going to whip down a little bit. One more thing before I invite Usha to come up. Just a quick word on premeditated giving. In my experience, most of it, and I want to deal again with another myth. And this is the myth that I will give as I feel led to. Right? I will give as I feel led to. And we've all seen the videos with those very moving songs, and we've seen the moving images on the TV, and they're pulling at our heartstrings. Listen, I'm not making any judgment on those things. They're incredible causes, and if you feel led to give to them, 100% go for it, right? Not ever going to say that that's wrong. But that's pulling at our heartstrings. It's trying to say, if you feel something, then you need to give. And we somehow in the church have got into the idea that spontaneous giving is somehow more spiritual than planned giving. That somehow if I'm moved by the Spirit to give, there's something more spiritual about that than actually saying, no, this is what I've got in my hands, and I'm going to sit down, I'm going to work out what I want to give out of that to bless the kingdom of God. Let me tell you something. Planned giving is far more spiritual than spontaneous giving, but don't give up spontaneous giving. Okay? Because Jesus said, didn't he? He said, if you're going to build a tower, then you've got to sit down and work out how much it costs. You don't just go, I just want to build a tower, so I feel led to build a tower, so we're just going to do it. He said, no, you've got to sit down and figure out the cost. And there are costs to being part of a church like this. We have things that we have to run. We have lights that we have to keep on. We have a building that we have to pay for. We have a hall here that we have to hire. We have all kinds of utilities. We have all kinds of expenses and all of those kind of things. So there is a reality to those things, but that doesn't have to be the motivation as to why we give. But we know that those things are there because it costs. And to sit down and go, right, this is what is in my hand. This is what is in my life. Lord, I'm going to give this to you because I feel this is right. I'm going to honor you with my wealth. It costs. I read this. It's a little bit, it's kind of connected, but it isn't. And I read that and I was absolutely blown away by this, and it challenged me right to the core. And I saw it, and this is a baptism questionnaire from a church in South Asia, right? This is a baptism questionnaire. So you want to get baptized, here's the questions that it asks. Are you willing to leave your home and lose the blessing of your family and your father? Are you willing to lose your job? Are you willing to go to the village and those there will persecute you? Are you willing to forgive them and share the love of Christ with them? Are you willing to give an offering to the Lord? Are you willing to be beaten rather than deny your faith? Are you willing to go to prison? Are you willing to die for Jesus? Now, we got baptism coming up in a few weeks. How many of you would be going, yep, I'll sign up for that? You see, there is a cost to following Jesus. And we have to sit down and work that cost out. We don't just move as we feel led to move. So it's important that we do that. Paul's instruction to the Corinthian church helps us. He says, each one of you, 1 Corinthians 16:2, he says, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income, saving it up so that when I come, you can give your offering to us. Planned giving is important. So I'm going to invite Usha to come and share for a couple of moments a little bit on what we're at. It's okay. Can you give us just a few more minutes and then I'll just wrap up for a couple of minutes at the end.
Yeah. Sorry about the time. Just bear with us. We thought it'd be really good for us to share as a family that we asking you or we telling you what we believe and not sort of sharing our experience and our relationship with money and God. And I just wanted to share a few thoughts about our story when we got married. But before that, I just want to say something, that my relationship with money comes from my relationship with my family. It started there with my mother, who was such a generous person. I remember as a youngster that there were, you remember that, don't you, as well, John? But the house was always open. There was always food there for whoever came. Whatever she had in the cupboard, she would make something out of nothing, it seemed, and she would give her stuff away. Even as when she got older, we would buy her really nice stuff, me and my sisters, and we'd go to the place where she was living, and we'd see the other ladies, and I'm thinking, I recognise that coat. That looks just like my mum's coat. And it would turn out and say, Mum, where's your coat? Oh, I gave that away to so-and-so, Gladys. She liked it. And it was like that with my mum. She just gave stuff away, and she lived just such a generous life. So that was my experience growing up. The food that we had, the stuff that we had. So we never sold anything. We never eBayed anything. I don't ever remember Mum saying, oh, let's make some money out of what we've got. Some good quality stuff. She would always, always give it away. So that was my relationship with money, my experience with money and generosity and wealth before I became a Christian. So fast forward, we got married at the age of 21, and I'd been a Christian since I was 12 years old, and obviously heard about giving and about God and about a spirit of generosity. And so we decided as a couple, everything went into one pot when we got married. It was one account, joint account, and we would give out of that. And we decided that we wanted to give a tithe, which is a tenth of our income, to God. And that's what we continued to do. And that was early on in our marriage. And for many years, we gave 10% of our net income. So everything that we, after tax, we paid, we gave 10%. And many years later, we kind of felt really challenged to give more than that, to give out of our gross money. And so we decided about 27 years ago, or whatever it was, we just really felt challenged that we wanted to give the on our gross income, which is what we've been doing for the last 27 odd years. Even in the difficult times, I was thinking about this, that when the kids were young, when the money was tight, we never stopped giving. We'd set up a standing order. That's how we've always given to our local church, and that's how we gave. And we always lived off the 90%. And over the years, we wanted to give beyond that, and we felt really challenged as well. And so we set up a blessing account. And what that was how at that time, money was tight. So we didn't have that much money. But what we did was, what can we save? How much can we put aside? So we put aside a certain amount of money, and we called it the blessing pot. And so what we would do is just bless either people or when there was a need. So that was outside of our tithes and offerings. That was outside of giving to the church. This was a pot specially to bless people, to bless when there was a need. So it was planned giving. That's what we had. And that's what we called it, a blessing account. We also gave to ministries, which we do now as well, things close to our heart. And so one of my heart is, against human trafficking. So I wanted to give, and we give to Hope for Justice as part of that. And there's many to Christians Against Poverty, to Compassion, Jivanash. And I'm not saying this for you to say, oh, wow. But this is what we do, and I'm being honest with you. This is our principles for giving. And as Chris said, that everything belongs to God. And so we prioritize our giving to give to God first. And one of the things that we were challenged by as well is, how could we up our 10%? And so that's what we've been trying to do, is to up on our tithe and our giving. So every year we try and see if we can actually increase our giving. And the principles that we abide by is, God owns everything. Give first, not last. Yeah, give God the best, not the rest. So live beyond your means. Live within your means, Live below your means. So budget well. Be consistent in generosity. Let it flow from your life. Giving is not based on convenience or circumstances, but giving should be a part of your life, and it should flow from our lives. You know, when something flows like water, you can imagine it just flows. And I just feel that that's how giving should be, how a generous spirit should be. And be sensitive to the needs and God's prompting as well. So giving can sometimes be planned, and giving can sometimes be spontaneous. So there are times when you listen to the Holy Spirit and he will say to you, there is a need there, that person needs something, send some money. And that's happened to us as a family, that God's spoken very, very specifically to go and bless somebody or to send some money to so-and-so. So be sensitive to God's prompting, but also you can be planned, like I said, that we have the giving account as well, and increase in generosity as God provides. So let it flow out of your life. let generosity flow out of your life. I mean, I've just crushed this into 5 minutes. But if you wanted to ask anything, if you please feel free to come and chat with us. You know, we were open about it. It's not something that I'm afraid to talk about money. So, yeah, feel free to talk to, and I'll hand it back to Chris.
Thank you, Ush. So we're going to round off in just a second. The big question that comes out of all of this then is, you know, the $64 million question is, well, then how much? How much do we give? And there's a very, very simple answer to that. You give what's in your heart. If you're going to honour God, are you honouring God? Can you put your hand on your heart and say, I'm honouring God with what I've got? And what we're trying to do today is not squeeze more money out of you. We're not saying go away now and, you know, double your tithe or double what you give or give more or what have you. We want you to go away and think about how you think about it. Think about how you think about what is yours and what is God's. What's the purpose of the stuff that you have in your life? Is it all for you? If you think it's all for you, fine, good, go for it. We're not going to come knocking on your door and asking why. You'll have to stand before God, of course, but that's between you and him. We're just simply saying today, how about let's turn the prism, let's turn the lens a little bit, let's try and see this in a slightly different way. What Usha has shared with you is how we've done it. Okay, and we're not going to get into talking about the tithe today and whether the tithe is Old Testament, New Testament, whatever it may be. You know, you can figure that out for yourself. Maybe we'll do some teaching on that another time. What we are going to say to you is, are you honouring God with what you've got? We've always used the tithe as something for us to surpass, not for something for us to assign to, try and get towards. To aspire towards. We've always said, no, that's our minimum. We want to go beyond that. We want to give beyond that. Why? A, because we want to honour God, but B, because that's what frees us up to receive the blessing of God into our lives. And the amount of things that we've done, the places that we've been, the things that we've seen, the experiences that we've had on really, you know, not really having the money to do all of that stuff is incredible because God has blessed us. You may be there thinking, well, but I've got so many expenses and what have you. Let me just say this last thing, and then we're going to stand and we're going to pray. And it's this. And it is based around that, the 10% thing. If your boss came into you tomorrow and said to you, we're really struggling at the moment, we've got to knock 10% off your salary, you would probably go, oh, that's a bit of a pain. That's really annoying. Oh dear, that's gonna take a little bit of reordering. That's gonna take a little bit of rethinking. But guess what? You'd make it work, right? You'd go home, you'd do your sums, and you'd make it work, regardless. And you might be upset with your boss. You might be upset with the company. You might, think, right, I'm going to move. I'm going to go somewhere else. But at the end of the day, you would make that work because you would cut your cloth according to what you have. I refuse to believe that people cannot give to God significantly because they don't have enough. It's all about planning what you have. We've always worked to our 90% and less, and we've said, no, we want to free ourselves up to give to the Lord. So our goal today is not, as I say, for you to suddenly just double your offering to the church. Our goal for you today and last week is to go away and say, okay, how do I see what is in my life? How do I see what is in my hand? Is this really God's or is that lip service? I come in and I say, oh Lord, I give everything to you, and then I go home and actually I am really, really miserly with what I have in my life. So let's stand together.